Today's topic is estimation. Here are some situations where estimation might be useful. An exact value may not be worth the trouble, such as determining the number of people in a large crowd. An estimate may be easier to work with. This happens often with prices such as $9.95 or $1.99. It is much easier to use $10 and $2 for these two prices. It may be safer to use an estimate. If you go to the store expecting to spend $17, you might want to take $20 to be sure you have enough money to pay the bill. An exact value may change from time to time. The population of a country, for example, changes constantly. An exact value may not be available. Someone might ask you how much you spent at a restaurant the day before. You might not remember the exact amount, but you probably can give an estimate of the amount that is close to the actual amount. Estimations are often made by using rounding. Three types of rounding are rounding to the nearest, rounding up, and rounding down. Here's $42.67. Round it to the nearest dollar. Well, it's closest to $43. Now let's round up to the next dollar. Also $43. But if we round it down to the previous dollar, it's $42. Here's $42.27. Round to the nearest dollar and we get $42. Round up to the next dollar, we get $43. And round down to the previous dollar, we get $42. Here's $42.50. Round to the nearest dollar, $42 or $43. $42.50 is as close to $42 as it is to $43. It's exactly halfway. Round up to the next dollar, $43, and round down to the previous dollar, $42. When rounding a number like $42.50 to the nearest dollar, while it is as close to $43 as it is to $42, in my experience, I've tended to round up more often than rounding down. Here's the number 1,953. Let's round it to the nearest hundred. 2,000, because when you count by hundreds, the next number after 1,900 is 2,000. Let's round down to the previous hundred, 1,900, and let's round up to the next hundred, also 2,000. Here's a representation of the number pi. Many calculators round pi to the nearest billionth. The actual digit in the billionths place is 3, but it rounds to the number above because the next digit in the 10 billionths place is 5. The calculator on my cell phone rounds pi to the nearest 100 millionth, and that's shown here in red. Let's round pi to the nearest thousandth. We find the thousandths place, it contains a 1, and then we look at the next place to the right, which is the 10,000ths place, and it contains a 5. And remember, in $42.50, the 5 was equidistant from $42 to $43, but in this case, because of all those other digits in the other places to the right of the 10,000ths place, we know that we need to add 1 to the 1 and round it to 3.142. Truncating is cutting off a decimal number after a particular decimal place. So truncating pi after the ones place gives 3. Truncating pi after the 10,000ths place gives 3.1415. Truncating for positive numbers will give the same results as rounding down. And that brings us to negative numbers. Here's negative 1,953. We round it to the nearest hundred, and it's closest to negative 2,000. We round it down to the previous hundred, and it's also negative 2,000. That seems a little backwards from positive numbers, and that's because negative 2,000 is smaller than negative 1,900. But with positive numbers, positive 2,000 is larger than positive 1,900. And then when we round up to the next hundred, the next number counting by hundreds that's larger than negative 1,953 is negative 1,900. It may be helpful to think of a number line when rounding negative numbers. And we have a number line, and we've graphed both pi and negative pi. And there's negative pi to the billionths place, and now we're going to round it to the nearest integer. Well, we don't really need a number line to know that to the nearest integer, it's negative 3. We look at the ones place, because integers count by ones, and we look at the tenths place, and we know that the nearest integer is negative 3. The number line may help when rounding negative pi up to the next integer, because you can look at the number line and see that the next integer to the right of negative pi is negative 3. And then we round negative pi down to the previous integer. We look at the number line again, and we can see that the integer to the left of negative pi is negative 4. And now we'll round it to the nearest hundredth. We look at the hundredths place. There's a 1 next to it. So to the nearest hundredth, it's negative 3.14. And then up to the next hundredths, remember it's negative. So the answer is negative 3.14. And down to the previous hundredth, it's negative 3.15. This lesson looked at estimation, rounding to the nearest, rounding up, rounding down, and truncating.